Hi friends, my name is Al or Lilstarnerd, and welcome to today's episode of The Circle of Life. You may recognize this as my sketchbook. My absolute pride and joy, except I've completed it, so I'm not using it anymore. And you know what happens when I finish a sketchbook around here? What do we get? What is it? That's right, a sketchbook tour. Except no, because I've already done that. I did that already. It's up, it's been up. What are you doing? Go watch that. But what comes after the sketchbook tour? That's right, the new sketchbook. And that's what we're doing today. We're starting the new sketchbook. Obviously, it's the same kind of sketchbook. I'm using a Strathmore Mixed Media Series 500. I really like these sketchbooks. I have an affiliate link down below for them, so if you're interested in getting one, you can use that link, and then I get some money. But yeah, strap in, grab your own sketchbook, and let's do some art. Let's go. So, starting a new sketchbook. I feel like this is always different for everyone. You know, everyone approaches it their own way. I know a lot of people hate the pressure of the first page, and so they'll skip it altogether or skip it and come back to it later. And I totally respect that. For me though, the first page it's like a necessary evil, kind of. I prefer to keep my sketchbooks as chronological as possible because I have a really bad memory. So if it's not chronological, I'll get really confused about stuff when I look back at it later. So I like to do my first page as the start of the sketchbook so I know exactly when I did that page, you know? I also like to take the first page as an opportunity to sort of set some intentions for the new sketchbook. It's not so much setting goals or anything strict, it's just getting into the mindset of, you know, here's a new start, let's make it good. In my last sketchbook, my first page was sort of supposed to be a touchstone of inspiration, so when I felt kind of trapped or without motivation, I could look back at it and remind myself of what kind of art I wanted to be making. This time, I don't really have any sort of intention or purpose behind the first page. In hindsight, I think it'll be a lot like last time. It'll be a great piece to look back on as inspiration, but instead of subject matter, it'll be great inspiration for energy and the process and originality. But the real motivation for this piece, the real purpose, was to be a draw this in your style piece. I have posted 2 of these challenges before, and both times so many people participated and seemed to really enjoy it, and I eat those kinds of challenges up, you know? And since the last one, and especially within these past few months, I've gotten a lot of people asking when I will do another one, and I've been wanting to, I wanted to do one. I've been so excited to host another one, but then I just didn't. I either was too busy to deal with managing the entries, or I just had no idea what to do. I couldn't come up with any ideas. But I thought, you know, I need to come up with something to do for the first page of this sketchbook, so why not do 2 in 1, right? So here we are. So this piece will be the piece that people will recreate in their own style. If you're interested in trying it out and you want to participate, there should already be a post with all the information on my Instagram account, so definitely go check that out after you watch this video. There aren't too many rules for this. Just recreate this piece, post it and my original piece together, tag me, use the hashtag Lilstarnerd, dtiys 2022, and that's it. Change any elements you want, pose, use whatever medium. I'm not too picky about how people recreate these kinds of things. I know some people are very particular about it has to be the exact drawing just in your style, which I get it because technically that's the challenge, that's the point. But I personally think it's more fun to see how creative and wild people get working off the same prompt, you know? So anyways, I really hope you guys consider trying this out because I would love to see what you guys come up with. I think it's a really fun piece and has a lot of wiggle room for showing off your style, for different expressions and moods and tones and color palettes, so I'm very excited to see what people think of it and how they interpret it. If you do plan on participating, let me know in the comments. I want to know. This will also be really interesting because my other 2 challenge pieces were both digital, and to be honest, I can't think of any prompt pieces that are traditional. Entry pieces are often traditional, but I don't think I've ever seen the prompt piece itself be non-digital. I mean, I'm sure people have done it. I'm not saying that I'm the first one, but I've just never seen it. So I don't know how that'll work. I don't know how that will work out or if it'll be hard for people. I don't know. I think for the post, I'm going to scan it so that there's a nice crisp view of the piece without a distracting backdrop and weird cropping and seeing the sketchbook itself. I think that'll be helpful. So yeah, the first page is a draw this in your style prompt, which I think is a fun and funky way to start my sketchbook. And you know what? It might be setting the tone too, because I intend on participating in a challenge or 2 throughout the sketchbook. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But now let's talk about the actual piece and the process of it and everything. I was brainstorming for multiple days, just racking my brain of what I could possibly do for this challenge. I talk about this pretty frequently on my channel, but I really struggle with originality and creativity. I rely way too heavily on references and tend to feel crippled when I don't have one. Usually my quote unquote ideas for art come from just like finding a photo that I'd like to recreate, which on its own isn't a bad thing, but when that's literally all I do, it gets a little old, you know what I mean? It gets a little old. So obviously I can't recreate a classic or a photo I don't own to use for a draw this in your style. And I didn't want to use any of my OCs just because I don't want something that means a lot to me to be like passed around the internet like that. So I basically had to come up with something like entirely original, which, as we've established, is hard for me. After a few days of thinking, I finally thought of a particular piece that I've often wanted to recreate, which is Circe Invidiosa by John William Waterhouse. I'm really drawn to that painting mainly because it's Circe, but I also love like the water flowing out of the bowl in that piece. And I thought of that painting, and I knew that was just something that I had been drawn to, mainly the bowl, and I wanted to recreate the bowl thing, like the water. And then this idea just like popped into my head. And that was it. It was that was my entire process. Not really. I did some prep. I really quickly thumbnailed the idea. This woman with these wild curls holding this skull, which is flowing with gold. And listen, before I continue, obviously, this is not how skulls work. Skulls are not bowls. This skull I drew is so far from being anatomically correct, but let's suspend our disbelief for the sake of enjoying the art, okay? So anyways, I did the thumbnail and I had a concept and I nailed it pretty fast. Like I didn't have to do too many thumbnails. I was very quickly happy with it, which very rarely happens. Like when I have an idea in my head, I usually like can't see it very clearly, and it takes many tries to get the thumbnail even kind of right. But by the time I get it right, I've overworked it so much that I don't like it anymore. So like I cannot tell you how amazing it was that I got it like within the first 2 tries. I tried to do a color comp. I wasn't really happy with it, but I was like, great, now I know what not to do. And that's all the prep that I need, which I did make coloring a little harder, but you know, we got through it. So I had my concept figured out, and then I did the sketch in my sketchbook. I had taken a photo of myself like with a flashlight for lighting and anatomy reference, which really helped because uplighting is really hard to make look good and not unflattering. I really liked the sketch, but realized that it was alarmingly off-center and the composition was awful, but I liked the sketch. So of course I'm not gonna erase it and start over. Absolutely not. If I try again, it's not gonna look good. So to sort of balance it out, because she was so far off to the right, I had the wind blow towards the left to like carry her hair and her skirt over, so she like filled up more of the center of the page. And honestly, I actually really prefer that. I love the movement. It's so much more dynamic than her just standing there with a totally flat dress making her look like a column. That's also when I added the slit in the dress, which again I love. Like I think that was the whole process of this piece was very like natural, and I pushed myself a lot more than I normally do in terms of like adding those little details, which that may seem so obvious to some of you guys, like the slit in the dress, but for me, who always relies on reference and otherwise like can only draw a stick, like this was just really like fun for me, and it felt very original and like natural, and I feel like it was more than basic, so I was really happy with it. I also really like the movement that the dress, like the wind creates. It creates these like motion lines. So there's this visual contrast with the stark lines of the gold spilling out of the skull. So I think that's cool. I think it might be compositionally incorrect, but I think it looks neat. I decided to work with markers because it just felt right. I've really been enjoying markers lately, and I wanted the lighting of this piece to feel very soft and rosy and warm, and I thought that markers would be the best way to achieve that. However, about a third of the way through the process, I felt like the piece was kind of transforming in my head. Again, going through that natural process. And I felt like this new version of the final piece that I was seeing in my head would take more than just markers to complete. So I also pulled out my watercolor for the background and eventually colored pencil to add detail and texture. For marker pieces, I've been trying to use colored pencil less and less and trust myself to get finer details with markers. However, for this piece, I wanted there to be a slightly chaotic feel to it, so the more texture and like grittier lines, the better. I wanted that contrast of the really soft and pretty lighting with the messiness that a colored pencil can bring. As I was pulling out my colored pencils, my hand automatically reached for my neon orangey pink pencil, which I absolutely adore. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could punch up her blush with this. And then I put it down and it looks so good. It looks so good. I was so happy with it. So I kind of went wild and ended up using it throughout the entire piece. I'm so glad I took the time to like play with the colored pencils, because I think I ended up adding a lot of stuff into the piece that I wouldn't have thought of because I wasn't copying from a reference, you know? Even though they're kind of little things, they kind of add up to a more polished, more complete final piece, if that makes sense. Things like bounce light on her arm, darker patches in the hair where it needed some contrast and framing, especially around like the white of her cheeks. Some of that neon orange around the outline of her arms and body for a sort of glowing effect. Oh, speaking of glowing, I had so much fun with the lighting of the golden liquid. Is it necessarily correct? Probably not, but it's so bold and bright and soft, and I think it just looks really pretty. And then the background. I'm kind of explaining this out of order, but it's like following the order of the thought process in my head, so go with me. It's a weird background, for sure. But I actually really, really love it. I love the messy lines. I love all the color. Like I said, this was not the route I originally intended for this piece. When I finished the base of the color of the woman, I pulled out the watercolor for the background and was absolutely stumped. Here's where trying another color comp could have really helped me out. So I took a bit of a break, walked away, and eventually came back and decided on blue. Because the piece itself was so warm and red and orangey, I thought a purpley blue would be a nice contrast, keep it from being too monochromatic, but wouldn't be super thematically confusing. I also didn't want to just do a solid color background, which is what I normally do, and I find very boring and disappointing when I do it. So I thought I would sort of like replicate clouds and have these large blobular lines, I guess. And once it dried, I did really like it, but it just felt incomplete. As a whole, I really like the way it turned out. It's not quite up to par with my referenced work, obviously, which is what always frustrates me about doing original work. But you know what? I think my original work is getting better, honestly, and I'm having a lot more fun with it. It's coming much more easily to me, which is really nice. I'm glad that this is how I started the sketchbook out, and I'm excited to see if other people like the piece enough to recreate it. Like I said before, if you want to take a stab at the draw this in your style, please do. Check out my Instagram. I'd love to see what you do with it. Anyways, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I had a great time doing it. Let me know if you intend on participating. If not, I hope you know that I'm going to cry myself to sleep tonight because of you. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shebang. Go pick some flowers, doodle a frog, and go do some art.